Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today talking to you about my work, the work that I love to do, that is write books. And a big thanks to Shyamla and Kahani Takbak for featuring me on this wonderful page where one can discover so much about writing for children. Now, the question people often ask me is, how did you become a writer? And it's hard for me to explain exactly how, but all I can say is that I have always been very fond of reading. And I feel the credit goes to my parents because from a very young age, my parents used to read out to me. Both my mother and my father. My father was a very busy doctor, but on a Sunday, he would make me sit on his lap and he would read out the comic strips from the Illustrated Weekly. And I thoroughly enjoyed, the antics of Brer Rabbit and was really intrigued by the phantom, that mysterious figure. So this was my first, an entry into the world of books. And later on, my father would order a lot of books for us. You see, we lived in a very small town, Almora in Uttarakhand, and there were no bookstores there. But there were people around us who had pretty decent collections of books. And definitely, I'm very grateful to them because I had access to books through people like my aunt, my Taiji, who had a very nice collection of children's books, classics like the Little Women series, what Katie did, and really nicely illustrated Gulliver's Travels. Then there was also a municipal library, and that I'm sure people find very surprising that there was a decently stocked municipal library in our town. We had to walk down; it was a decent walk, about two miles. But that's the way we went everywhere. There were no other forms of conveyance than our own two legs. We always enjoyed the walk. Then, when I was 7, I went to boarding school, and there was an excellent library in our school, though our reading was strictly supervised. But at that time, we were not as fortunate as children are today to have a vast variety of books and authors to choose from. What we read was Enid Blyton, and more Enid Blyton. Maybe some other authors like Angela Brazil, whose stories I really liked, and then Elena Brindaya, and also the Billy Bunter stories. And the character whom I really enjoyed, William, my older sister, introduced me to the William books, and we had a lot of laughs reading them together sometime. So that was how I became a reader. And I guess if you're an avid reader, there's always some point in time when you are impelled to write your own stories. And in my college days, I did. I did write some short stories, not children's stories. But being a very laid back person, I didn't make a serious attempt to publish them. Now, children often ask me when I visit schools, was it your childhood ambition to become a writer? And I say, no, I was not very sure what I wanted to become. In my later teens, I did nurture ambitions of becoming a journalist. But it just so happened that I lost my father when I was in my MA final. And after that, it became necessary for me to look for a job. And I decided to take up a teaching job. I applied for a lecturer's post in Delhi University College, and I got the job. And that's what I was doing for over 3 years. I taught English, and then I got married, and when my oldest daughter was born, I think I was not really crazy about that job. So I had a good excuse to withdraw and just stay at home, taking care of uh, my children, my three daughters. But the fact was, I was just very restless, and I really wanted to get back, to work somewhere. I was not sure whether I wanted to go back to teaching. And then after a lot of soul searching and trying out a few things that just didn't work out, it struck me that since I had been good at writing, I used to get prizes for essays, etc., etc. Maybe I can try my hand at freelancing. That would mean that I could work from home, which was important at that time. So I sat down and I wrote a humorous piece about our dog, our old dog, and I sent it off to the Hindustan Times. And at that time, newspapers used to publish middles, and I really enjoyed reading middles, little pieces on everyday life, reflective pieces. And as luck would have it, it was published. So this was a real boost for me, and it motivated me to write more such pieces. And I was always looking out for opportunities to publish. And some of my pieces were published. Many came back, but I just kept going because I realized this was something I really enjoyed doing. And at that time, in the mid 80s, I used to subscribe to this magazine, this wonderful magazine for children, Target. And as I was reading it, I was always a person who crazy about reading, always running out of reading matter. So it struck me that maybe I could also try contributing to this magazine, and I sat down and wrote a story for children, which I must confess was not accepted. It was sent back, but the amazing thing was the rejection letter I received. That was the best rejection letter maybe that I've received till now. The editor, the then editor, Rosalind Wilson, she told me she could not use the story, but I should try again. And I did. And my third story was published in Target. And I felt that this is, a genre of writing that I enjoyed, and especially because my children were quite young at that time. And at the same time, I really wanted to, get a book published, write a book, and see, hold a book that I had written in my hands. And I became aware of the Children's Book Trust competition for writers. Children's Book Trust was the only major publisher of children's books at that time. And they announced a theme for that year's competition, and it was portraying girls and boys as equals. And this is the book that I had sent, the manuscript that I sent, Ashok's New Friends. Well, I didn't get a prize in the competition, but the book was taken for publication, and a few years later, it received the NCERT National Award for Children's Literature. So this was a milestone for me. Though, I continue to freelance for newspapers and magazines, right, till, almost 2000. But I mentioned earlier that I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton. So the next book I wrote was a mystery story. And where is it? I must show it to you. Yeah, here it is. A Capital Adventure. This again I sent to the Children's Book Trust competition, and it received the second prize. I'm sorry, I think the lettering is coming inverted, so you have to guess at the title. It's A Capital Adventure. Now the Capital Adventure And then another mystery story which I wrote for another publisher with whom I'm still associated, Ratnasagar. And I wrote a mystery story for them too. And the book in the corner, the red book, it's titled 3 Days to Disaster. So this was the third book I wrote, and all three books came out in 1990. So that was a good year for me where books were concerned. And after that, I continued to write picture books and mystery stories. And this is another mystery story of mine which has been very well received. It was reprinted several times. The Hilltop Mystery. It was published by Madhuvan Books, the imprint of Vikas Publishers. And in between, I was writing picture book stories also. And here's a story, The Walking Tree. This is a Hindi translation of another book called The Toy Story, which is still popular. You know, the Children's Book Trust titles are reprinted over and over again, and they go into thousands. So, and also, translated into different language. So it's very delightful to know that so many children have been reading your books. And in fact, very recently, I did a storytelling session on the toy horse, and the theme was kindness. So it's a story about kindness. And also in the 90s, I wrote this series of picture books. Lippo goes to a party, Lippo goes to the park, and Squiggly goes to school, Bamba and Pinky. The funny thing was that this story was inspired by a pet, not a pet, a stuffed toy my daughter had. My daughter's nickname was Bamba at the time, and she had a Pink Panther stuffed toy. So, since I had to write an animal story, I was trying to think of the characters, and I said, why not Bamba? And I made Bamba into a bear. She hasn't complained, thankfully. So this set of books are still in print, still circulating very widely, and often when I go to schools, when I show these books to the children, they say, "Oh, we've read it," and sometimes I get calls or messages from parents searching for these books, asking me where to buy them, and I really enjoyed writing them because they're most of them, humorous little stories. Now, around, when I was writing for Target magazine, I had written a long short story for the annual number titled Caravan to Tibet. And it was a story that was based, or I should say, inspired by my family history. And many years later, I sent it to an American magazine titled Cricket. It's a very widely circulated and well regarded magazine in the US. So, Caravan to Tibet was published again in three parts, and in fact, I have contributed many folk tales to that magazine too, which I'll talk about later. So then I got the bright idea of converting Caravan to Tibet into a full-length adventure story because that's what it was. It was an adventure story. It was about a journey to Tibet, a very dangerous and eventful journey. And it took me many years, a lot of research, and finally Puffin accepted it for publication. And I was absolutely delighted because it was a story close to my heart. And later, much later, in 2008, it was placed on the IBI honor list by the Association of Writers and Illustrators for Children, of which I have been a member, and I used to be a very active member, but I'm still associated, and I was very thankful that they put it on the IBI honor list. Okay, I was writing other kinds of stuff too, And growing up in the hills, you people are very scared of ghosts, and ghosts are very real to them. And I heard a lot of ghost stories as a child from my my various people, my ayah, my other help, or even neighbors, etc. At that time, I wrote some ghost stories. I don't have a copy of that book anymore. It was titled Ghosts Everywhere. And then I wrote this other story, Traveler's Ghost, which is sadly out of print. But I really enjoyed writing this story, and I'm hoping that sometime some other publisher might take it up again. And here's another mystery story of mine, The Hunt for the Miracle Herb, which is unfortunately also out of print. Okay, now I do various kinds of writing. I dabble in various genres. As you can see, all my books are ranged, around me. And I, after Caravan to Tibet, I did a translation of the famous Hindi novel Chandrakanta. Chandrakanta was a really exciting book. It was a cult novel and the first modern Hindi novel, and a fantastic suspense story. So I was asked to translate this for the Puffin Classic series. And I have been translating earlier from Hindi into English stories for adults and a novel as well. And this was an absolutely delightful experience because it's an amazing story. And you think about it, how the whole story is constructed. It's a masterpiece of suspense. So if you're looking for classic literature, do pick up Chandrakanta. You will enjoy it. Now, I have mentioned that my first story is about portraying boys and girls as equals. So, gender is a theme that crops up often in my books. And I had a collection of stories published around 2000 and 2004, not just girls. These were some of them were old stories which had already appeared in magazines, and some I had written freshly for this collection. And these were all stories of girl empowerment. And this book was used as reader for many years in some schools till it went out of print. And again, that's an author's tragedy when a book goes out of print. But recently, I'm happy to say, I had another similar book published by Ratnasagar, Go Girl Go. So these are new stories and for a slightly older age group than not just girls. And this book also is being used as a supplementary reader. I hope many girls are, receiving uh, motivation and are being empowered by stories that show that girls can do practically anything in the world. Talking of girl power, I also wrote a fantasy story, The Game of Shadows. You see the books on top of me. The third story. It's about a girl who goes out to look for her missing parents who were abducted by this evil creature, this evil fantasy character, the King of Shadows, and imprisoned in his world, Shadowland. This was one of my earliest books for Scholastic. After that, I've written many books for Scholastic, including a book on writing, which I don't have a copy of right now, but it's titled Write Right, and it's gone into several reprints because it's a guide to writing basically. Because after all these years of struggling and discovering by trial and error, I felt I was in a position to guide others. So that's another book. I run out of copies, and I hear it's being reprinted for I don't know, maybe the 10th or 12th time. And also, I wrote two biographies for Puffin in the Puffin Live series. One is Rani Lakshmi Bai, and it seems almost serendipitous because once I picked up Mahashweta Devi's, it's a translation basically of Mahashweta Devi's wonderful biography, The Queen of Jhansi, and I thought I would like to write about the Rani of Jhansi sometime, and it just so perfect starting the series. So I got the opportunity to write this, and subsequently Chanakya, another fascinating character from history. And I'm very happy to hear that these books are in great demand. And just recently, I did a session of them in a school children's literature festival in Gurgaon. Well, you can see that I write in many different genres, and I've been doing a lot of retold also. So, among my new books are two retold collections of retold stories. One is the Scholastic Book of Hindu Gods and Goddesses, and the other is my very new book, Sacked Folk Tales You Can Carry Around. And this is just come out just this month. So we have so many wonderful stories in our tradition, and I really love to read them and also retell them whenever there was a demand. I've also done the folk tales of Uttarakhand, my home state, and published by Children's Book Trust. And these are very different and almost unknown from in other parts of the country. I've interspersed them with rhymes, the way folk tales are sometimes told. So, friends, these are some of my books. I don't want to talk too long, but I would also like to mention that I've edited and compiled several anthologies, and one of them right at the back is 100 Great Poems for Children. I love reading poetry. I like to write poetry, though for some odd reason I don't write too many poems for children. They just don't happen to me. They just don't emerge from my consciousness. So that is one book I love doing. Then again, another one, Best Stories from Around the World, which came out last year and has been well received. And before that, I compiled some other anthologies. And one book I must mention, which came out last year, and this is another retold book. Those very popular stories from our tradition, Vikram Vetal stories. When you look at the cover of this book, you'll know right away which stories these are. And this is based on an actual written version, not the retold versions of Vikram and Vetal, but an actual written version of Vikram and Vetal. And writing retelling these stories was a process of discovery for me, because though I had, read Vikram Vetal stories in Chandamama as a child, I had not thought too deeply about them. So I discovered so many meanings in these books, in these stories, I should say. So let's say each book is a process of discovery, whether it's your own story or whether it's something which already existed in our tradition and you are retelling it in your own way. Because just as readers find different meanings in the stories you've written, meanings which were maybe there, but in your subconscious, you're not aware of them. Similarly, you can find fresh meanings in traditional tales and retell them in many different ways. So, these are my books from, say, beginning to the present. I won't say the end because I'm hoping to write many more books. I'm actually writing more books, and well, maybe one day I'll be talking about my latest book to you. So, thanks very much for listening. And this was supposed to be live, but it was not working out. But I'll be very happy to entertain questions and answer them at a later stage. Thanks and goodbye and good luck for everything.